And here is the really interesting part. More than half of them, 53% of them, are actually located in one country. And we'll talk about that a little bit, and also take a look at why is that. So the oldest family business dates back to the year 578, and it has mastered succession for 46 generations. Now think about that, because a lot of the work that we do, we see such difficulty in even the first to second generation transition. And some of these family businesses have survived and done very well through many generations, 46 to be exact here. So let's open this up for some discussion. Which country do you think, or maybe you know, which country is it that has the oldest family businesses? 53% of family businesses in the world are in this country. Anyone in the audience want to take? Sorry? Germany? Oh, sorry. Wow. There we go. No, not Germany. Nice. There are some very old family businesses there, but it's not Germany. Italy? Another good guess, and there are some old ones there as well, but no. Another good guess? Not really. Let's have a couple more, and then I will tell you what it is. China. Not quite. Any others? Sorry? I couldn't hear. Japan. Who said that? Wow. Yes, that is exactly what it is. It is Japan. Does anyone know why? Why Japan? Family values, absolutely. Let me zero in on the number one reason why it has been Japan. There is a system in Japan that has been in place for centuries now that is about legally adopting an adult to come into the family business and run it. So in the Japanese culture, how things worked was that you needed a son. The oldest born son usually took over, but when there wasn't any sons in the family business, or the son was not capable of taking over as the owner or next generation leader, what they did was bring in somebody from the outside who would actually be adopted legally and who would give up his own family name and take on the name of the family business. And this actually happened more with daughters. So if you had a daughter, there was a system of marrying the daughter to somebody who was very capable of taking over the family business. And this adopted son-in-law came in, and this worked very, very well. And to this day, this practice goes on and has been very successful. So almost 100%, it's 90 plus, some say 98% of Japan's 81,000 adoptees are males between the ages of 25 and 30. And we will talk about why some of this works as well. I have a podcast. It was actually, I started out with a video that didn't work very well. I need to actually set it up, and I'm hoping that'll work. So if you can give me just a couple of minutes here. No.
Okay, so I went through the oldest and some of the recipe for success. Well, there are lots of ingredients that go into making a successful business, but it seems a large part of it is that family-run businesses aren't as myopically focused on things like quarterly returns and tend to project continuing the family tradition and name going on a much larger scale. This is a long-term focus, to be sure. So now what makes Japan so in tune with the business of longevity? Well, in Japan, they have a bilateral kinship system. That is to say that both the female and male line of descendants are recognized. But Japan also has a succession largely determined by patrilineal succession of head of household. So heading a household gives one the control of the household and estate, which would include things like farmland, businesses, etc. This aspect of Japanese life was usually handed down to the eldest son. Now, over so many years, you can imagine sometimes an eldest son wasn't available, like only daughters, or maybe someone had no sons. How would the family business and name continue on? The answer to this was adult adoption. And Japan has a long history of this dating back to the 13th century. So when a family found they didn't have a male heir or they had an incompetent or disabled son, they looked elsewhere, outside the family, in the form of adult adoptions. Used mostly by samurais at first, it gained popularity outside the samurai class in subsequent centuries. So what would happen is a family might marry their daughter to a man, then adopt that man into their family. He would become what is known as a mukiyoshi, meaning adopted son-in-law. In doing this, the man would assume the family's last name and continue on their lineage as if he were now part of that family, abandoning his old family in name anyways. But what if the family had no sons or daughters? Well, in this case, a family would still adopt a male heir, and this would be most seen amongst families and second sons. You see, the second-born son couldn't be the head of a household if an elder son took the position. So it was advantageous for a second son to be adopted by another family to become the heir of that household/business. And once you're head of a household, you gain prominence in a community, so win-win for everyone. And if the new adoptee was not to be marrying a daughter, they are free to marry whom they like while carrying on the family name. In modern-day Japan, this still occurs, and particularly when a business has no male heir. This adopted son is usually chosen for being business savvy, and this is done with the goal of preserving the family business. You might be familiar with businesses like Suzuki, Kikkoman, and Toyota. These companies all practice this tradition of adult adoptions. You'll see members of the founding families in leadership in these companies today. Incidentally, these companies are pretty old themselves, all being over at least 75 years old. Now, initially, early on in the 20th century, being a mukiyoshi, or adopted son-in-law, was looked down as being embarrassing. Some might say a real D-baller. It was looked at as being kind of emasculating. But as Japan's business sector grew and birth rates fell, this practice started being more closely associated with big companies. And being the head of a big company is positive in a capitalist society, so views quickly changed and adoption rates climbed. In fact, Japan has some of the highest adoption rates in the world, and according to The Economist in 2011, there were more than 81,000 adoptions in Japan, and 90% of those adoptions were of adult males in their 20s and 30s. the right age to start mentoring someone to take over a family business. And I'll link to this article in the show notes. It's an interesting read, so check it out. Now, this practice also has another benefit. Family-run businesses are surprisingly competitive and often outperform other companies that aren't family-owned. You see, rather than the decay of nepotism, infusing new outside blood to the family bolsters business. So they bring in new ideas that are fresh and, have something to prove. Instead of a disinterested heir who might be lazy and doesn't understand what it takes to maintain an edge, an adopted heir eager to prove himself and keep the name strong brings a focus that encourages lasting power. And that's the story, listeners, of the oldest companies and some of what helps to keep them going.
Okay, so we've looked at one country that has had very successful processes in terms of family business succession, and they have had a unique way of dealing with it, which is this adopted adult son-in-law to come in, and they have found that this has actually improved business performance tremendously. But let's look at some other ones worldwide. So I've just listed a couple from Japan. The first one, Kongo Gumi, really did very, very incredible Buddhist temples. That's what their construction was about. And they are still in operation today and doing very well. As you can see, there's all types of businesses, from innkeeping and wine and olive oil and glass and paper and gold. And once again, shipbuilding, ceramics, firearms. I want to zero in on the last bullet, though, which is a Spanish family business located in Barcelona, which was established in the year 1551, known as Codorniu Raventos, because we are going to talk about that a little bit later. I met the 18th generation, and actually Greg and Anjali did as well. The 18th generation, one of the people in the 18th generation of this family business, and have gotten to talk with him over time. He lives in Barcelona, but I talked with him as recently as a month ago. So we will talk a little bit about some of what he has looked at as their success factors.